Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Omar Dakin. I am 13, and inshallah I will be reciting Surah Al-Isra, ayah 9 to 15. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن هذا القرآن يهدي للتي هي أقوم ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا كبيرا وأن الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة أعتدنا لهم عذابا أليما ويدعو الإنسان بالشر دعاءه بالخير وكان الإنسان عجولا وجعلنا الليل والنهار آيتين فمحونا آية الليل وجعلنا آية النهار مبصرة لتبتغوا فضلا من ربكم ولتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب وكل شيء فصلناه تفصيلا وكل إنسان ألزمناه طائره في عنقه ونخرج له يوم القيامة كتابا يلقاه منشورا اقرأ كتابك كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا من اهتدى فإنما يهتدي لنفسه ومن ضل فإنما يضل عليها ولا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى وما كنا معذبين حتى نبعث رسولا صدق الله العظيم.
MashaAllah. Takbir. Allahu Akbar. MashaAllah. I'd like to ask Bilal Al-Hakim, another one of our students from the Hifz program, to come forward and do the translation, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Just give me a second here. Gotta try and open this. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Bilal Al-Hakim. I'm 14 years old. And inshallah, I'll be sharing the translation of Surah Al-Isra, ayahs 9 to 15. And then I'll share a short reflection, because honestly, these ayahs, like all the beautiful ayahs of the Quran, have really touched my heart. So, subhanallah. Now, ayah 9, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, indeed this Quran guides to that which is most suitable, and gives good tidings to the believers who do righteous deeds, that they will have a good reward. And that those who do not believe in the hereafter, we have prepared for them a painful punishment. And man supplicates for evil, as he supplicates for good, and man is ever hasty. And we have made the night and day two signs, and we erased the sign of the night and made the sign of the day visible, that you may seek bounty from your Lord, and may know the number of years and the account of time, and everything we have set out in detail. And for every person we have imposed his fate upon his neck, and we will produce for him on the day of resurrection a record which he will encounter spread open. It will be said, read your record, sufficient is yourself against you this day as accountant. Whoever is guided is only guided for the benefit of his soul, and whoever errs only errs against it. And no bearer of burdens will bear the burden of another, and never would he punish until we send a messenger. Now subhanAllah, these ayahs, to me, they really kind of sum up life. You know, we are the ones that make our decisions. I always thought of it like we're like wood carvers, and we're making the vase of our akhirah. Now, we either have the option to make this vase that'll break up after you hold it in your hands, it'll crumble to pieces, or we have a vase that is beautiful and shiny, or we can have a vase that is, just completely doesn't work out and looks kind of like a flat thing or something. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made life simple. Like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to make you be lost. Like in ayah 15, ayah 10 or something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَحَوْنَا آيَةَ اللَّيْلِ وَجَعَلْنَا آيَةَ النَّهَارِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He brings forth the sign of the day, and then He brings forth the sign of the night. So it's not like you only have signs for like 5 p.m. every day and that's it. Constantly, every single day, 24 hours, you have signs. And all you have to do is look up. I apologize for taking a little longer than I'm supposed to. And remember everybody, you have to, your akhirah is in your hands. So carve your vases to the perfection, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan.
Takbir. 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 MashaAllah. Wisdom from such a young soul. That's amazing. MashaAllah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. It's wonderful, mashallah, to see so many familiar and new faces tonight here for this very special program. I was asked to say just a few kind of opening remarks, if you will, and then we'll, of course, turn it over to our illustrious speakers and scholars that have traveled from afar and from close by to come. I wanted to just begin with a story. It's actually a personal story. Many of you who have known me over the years know that I've talked off and on about this little program known as ALIM, right, from time to time. Maybe heard it in a khutbah or a talk, something like that. And I've had a number of students ask me, well, what is it? What was it? The American Learning Institute for Muslims, believe it or not, was established a quarter of a century ago. It feels weird for me to be saying that like that, but yes, 25 years ago is when it was started. And I was fortunate enough to attend the program in the year 2000. I actually just showed Ubaydullah, do me a favor, read the date at the top of this notebook.
July 2nd, 2000.
I have kept this notebook with me for the last 23 years. And as you can tell by the wear and tear on it, it's used quite frequently. The 1-month summer program that ALIM offered me back in 2000 set me and I would argue the people in that program on a trajectory of learning, of educating, and of living the ideals as best we could of Islam. Now, it's not an easy journey, as many of us know. There's a lot of struggles along the way. There's difficulties. But unfortunately, in today's world, what we are most confronted with is confusion. Confusion. There's a dua of the Prophet ﷺ, Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqa warzuqna ittiba'a wa arina al-batila batila warzuqna ijtinaba. Oh Allah, allow us to see truth as truth and to follow it, and to see falsehood as falsehood and to stay away from it. And in today's world, brothers and sisters, truth has become mixed with falsehood. There's a lot of half-truths, semi-truths, non-truths that are out there that are vying for the position of truth. And as a 20-something-year-old at the time, I was inquisitive about my faith, but I was not necessarily grounded. Right? So I knew how to pray. I did. I mean, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward my parents and the community. That was something that they had established. I knew how to pray. But when Dr. Jackson in class asked us a question and said, what do you do when the imam stands up for a 5th rak'ah? None of us knew. None of us knew.
That wasn't a fair question.
Depending on the madhab, right? Yeah. Now he tells me it's not a fair question, right? Back then, it seemed like, oh my God, I don't know the answer to this. What do we do? How are we going to deal with our faith? And in that program, for those that have attended, actually just by show of hands, how many people have attended an ALIM program in the past? MashaAllah, about 25 to 50%, MashaAllah. So as you know, these programs are designed for us to study different disciplines, seerah, aqidah, history, and you really realize how rich our tradition is. But ultimately, I feel, looking back on it now, that it gave me two things. Two very important things. Number one, ALIM provided me and those students with the courage to ask the hard questions. The courage to ask the hard questions. Why does that require courage? Because all too many of us will hear a hadith and it'll beat us upside the head, and now all of a sudden we're out of the faith. Too many of us are not asking the hard questions when our own children are the ones bringing it to us. We refuse to engage, but ALIM gives us the tools to ask those questions. The courage, the confidence to say, you know what, I can still be a Muslim even if I have questions that are unanswered or things that I don't know. That was the first thing that it empowered us with. The second, it gives you a real dose of humility. Humility to realize that you may think you know the answer, but in our tradition, the opinions are vast. There's not just one way. And I think for me, growing up as a Muslim in America, seeing people of different madhabs, ethnicities, backgrounds, and faiths, that really helped ground the idea of, diversity in faith, and yet worshiping the same God. As Dr. Jackson said, and Imam Munir at the program, unity is not uniformity. It does not require us all to be and look the same, but it does require us to have one another's back. It's in that context, brothers and sisters, that years ago when I came back into the community after college, having attended the ALIM program, that I found a community that was willing to address and hear the courageous questions that were being asked. We have leaders and teachers in our community like Imam Majid, like Dr. Zainab, that want us to engage in that questioning. They want us to engage in how do we answer those hard questions. That's how we are going to ground ourselves and inshallah our progeny in this faith. So I wanted to give that as some context because this weekend we're going to ask some hard questions. They don't know it yet. But we're going to ask some hard questions. We're going to help see if we can answer some of those questions. Because our tradition is one in which there is a need. There's actually many tools available for us to be able to deal with so much of what's going on in the society around us. And we're going to talk. For anyone that's seen the program, you've seen, we're going to be addressing the concept of Tawheed, what that means for a Muslim. We're going to be talking about the history of modernity and postmodernity and how do we deal with that in today's context. What are the practical realities of that? What are some of the things that we need to be able to address from within our own tradition? And by the way, guys, this is not something that's new to us. For anyone that has read this book or a variation of it, Carl Trueman published last year Strange New World. Now, he is an admitted Christian in this book, trying to grapple with the exact same questions that you and I are grappling with. To what extent can we adopt neoliberal theology, and to what extent do we need to be wary of that? Right? And he does a fantastic job of tracing the history of how certain ideas and ideologies in our culture got to where they are. Right? It's important for us to understand this as we go out and ask those hard questions in search of the answers from within our tradition. So I wanted to just caveat that or give you kind of a primer for that. So for tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we have an introduction to some of the different sessions that we will be discussing over the course of this weekend. For those that have not registered, we have tables set up outside. We encourage you to register after tonight's program. And really, get ready to put your thinking caps on. Right? We're gonna require some of us to be thinking, so to speak. So, inshallah, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and begin with Dr. Zainab. Okay, all right. So she's punted it over to Dr. Jackson now. So, inshallah ta'ala, we'll go ahead and begin with some introductory remarks for a session with Dr. Jackson. Then we'll go to Ustadh Ubaydullah, and then we'll end, inshallah, with Dr. Zainab. I would normally do a really nice long introduction for Dr., but that's what he's going to do. So
I have to hold this?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وقني شر نفسي وفلت لساني وان أضل أو أضل أو أذل بيري حق رب العالمين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Ustadh Zainab, according to Shad, punted to me, and so I'm going to half punt back to her in some ways, perhaps putting her on the spot. I want to begin my remarks building on something that Shad said, and circling back to something that Ustadh Zainab's father, rahimahullah, Sheikh Taha Alwani, who I considered a friend and a mentor, said on many, many occasions, and he was very emphatic about this. Shad mentioned that there were many competitors out there for the position of ultimate truth. And I think that on some level, that's true. But I think at the same time, we have to be careful. And I'm tiptoeing up to this point because it's a point that many of us may not be comfortable with considering. And I'm not trying to be gratuitously provocative. I don't have time for that. And I mean that very seriously. Many of you might not know it, but I recently went through a health situation that was potentially lethal. So I'm on time that Allah has given me beyond anything that I could have done for myself or even that the doctors could have done for me. So I'm not here to impress anybody. I'm not here to try to be provocative and get a bunch of likes or whatever it is those people do on social media. I'm here because, I'm here because I was invited, but what I want to say because I think it's really important that we as Muslims come to a point where we have the courage, we have the yaqeen, we have the attachment to the tradition of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whereby we can look out at the world and diagnose it for what it is and not for what we would like it to be. Because as long as we just look at the world in terms of what we would like it to be, we will throw stones at it, but we won't change it. And we will continue to live as people who live lives of dependency. And what do I mean by that? We're here this weekend talking about what? Postmodernity, postmodernism, and all that stuff. Postmodernism is a response to what? Modernity. All right? Modernity is the product of whom? Us? Us? The response to that modernity, postmodernism, is the response of whom? Us? Not us. And yet, we have to live in a world that is infused by the ideas and the sensibilities that has been produced by someone else's history. And this is what takes us back to a comment that, not a comment, a theme that Sheikh Taha used to say all the time. And I'm going to preface it with a very potentially controversial question, not to be controversial, but in order for us to begin to think about this critically. If there are competitors for truth, what is our goal? To make our truth triumphant? That's a real question. What's our goal? To make our truth triumphant? What is it? No, don't. La, that's a different issue. And if you want, we come back to that. It's a different issue. My point is this. Even if the Quran tells us very clearly, even if you bring them every ayah, they won't follow you. That truth is manifest. It does not necessarily mean that they will follow. And so this raises the question. And nobody leave now because I don't want, you heard him say this and we heard him explain it. Just sit tight. Is truth enough? Is the truth of Islam enough? If we make it clear that ours is the truth, will that be enough to change the world? And this takes me back to, I've been getting to it for a long time now, to Sheikh Taha. Sheikh Taha used to say that if you read the Quran, there are three dominant themes in the Quran. One is Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, the one who alone has any control over human destiny, as well as the physical world. Tawheed. The second is Tazkiyah, that we are not just minds, all right? We are integrated human beings. We have souls, we have psyches, and those things often dictate our behavior far more than what's in our mind. Far more than what's in our mind. And so we are in need of purifying ourselves. You know, one of my tests, and I fail it all the time, but inshallah, as a test, it keeps me in a position of keeping my eye on the prize. I was told a story by a dear friend about Maulana al-Mawdudi. And let me just say, I mean, as an intellectual, I'm not quite in the camp of a Mawdudi. That's not a, he doesn't agree with me either. I mean, that's not a, I mean, I'm a Maliki, I'm not a Hanafi. No, I'm not trying to score any points at the expense of Maulana al-Mawdudi, rahimahullah. But despite the differences that we might have here, he's one of my heroes. Heroes. And I'll tell you what, talk about tazkiyat an-nafs. At one point, al-Mawdudi was condemned to death. They passed a death sentence on him, right? On various charges. The jailer of Mawdudi tells his story. He says, I've seen men aged 30 years in one night waiting to be executed on the morn. 30 years. I've seen them with my own eyes. This guy went to sleep and snored. Y'all don't get that, do you? You talking about tawakkul ala Allah? You talking about istislam lillah? You talking about knowing who is in charge? That's not here. We all know that here, don't we? I remember the night before my dissertation defense. Didn't sleep a wink. This guy was looking at death. And guess what? They didn't execute him on duty. Who's in charge? Did he know that here or here or here? The whole thing. That's tazkiyah. That's tazkiyah. Shaykh Alwani used to say, tawheed wa tazkiyah, and the third thing, and this is what he used to say, this is what we have ignored as Muslims. Amran. Amran, that is building civilization. Because civilizations carry messages. And civilizations make those messages either valuable, seemly, esteemed, or not. Does anybody understand what I mean by that? A civilization that is less accomplished may have the best idea about X in the world. Nobody will take it. Because the carrier civilization does not confer that air of confidence on those ideas. Another civilization, and we don't have to name any, right, may be very highly accomplished as a civilization and may have ideas that are absolutely ridiculous. And yet people will latch on to those ideas because they are carried by that civilization. And one of the things that we as a Muslim community must get back to is the idea that yes, we must hold fast to tawheed. Yes, we must develop regimes of tazkiyah. But at the same time, we must again become makers of civilization. And we have to get off civilizational welfare to the West or anyone else. And until we do that, our truth is for anybody who's affected by that superior civilization is going to be just like that truth that I talked about of that little lowly civilization over here. And not even just for the rest of the world, for the people there as well. You know, Shad mentioned that there's a lot of confusion out there. And I know that many of us, we feel that confusion. No? Right? I mean, I can tell you that, you know, Muslims are debating issues today in America that I could not have imagined anybody even having a question about just 30 years ago, 25 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. All right? But what I want to offer you is the fact that this is not the first time that Muslims have lived in societies that were rife with confusion. All kinds of competing ideas, ideologies, religions, etc. You take somebody like Imam Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa died. I said what? Died, rahimahullah, in the year 150 of the Hijrah. 150. In Iraq, when he died, in 150, the percentage of Muslims could not have been more than 13%, 15% max. Oh yeah. Muslims were a numerical minority in most of these places that became the Muslim world. And most of them would not become simple majority Muslim for 250 years. I know some of you, this is shocking, no? It's unbelievable, huh? Tell you what you do. Go ask any scholar who studied Islam historically. Anyone. This is not just me. This is common knowledge. Anyone. They were a numerical minority. Right? How is it that they were able to rise to the challenge of all of that confusion? Part of it was that they were makers of civilization. People live culture and civilization far more immediately than they do ideas. Does anybody understand what I mean by that? Right? And the best civilizations are those that package those ideas, all right, in ways that they can be absorbed spontaneously. And the Muslims succeeded in doing that. And one of the ways that they did not shrink from these challenges. They did not shrink from these challenges. And I'm going to try and wrap this up in a minute. And this is one of the challenges we have now, they were able to approach those challenges from the perspective of their own deen, their own values, their own principles. Not simply trying to, this is part of the challenge we have. We're Muslims in America, and by the way, all over the world now. You have to learn somebody else's history, all right, just to be able to compete on the world stage. No? No? That's part of the price that we pay when we fail to produce an Islamic civilization. They didn't have to do that. They could just take out their swords and charge it, intellectual swords. No, the other swords too. I'm not a pacifist, right? But even they conquered the territories, no question about that. All right? How then did they stay a Muslim minority for 250 years? What were they doing for 250 years? It would not have taken them 250 years to forcibly convert all those people, would it? What were they doing? They were gaining adherents. People were converting to Islam. Islam became the thing to be. Islam became the natural thing to become. And they had the confidence to do that. This is why, for me, one of the greatest challenges we have, and Shad alluded to it, and I know it sounds like almost a hollow mantra, but one of the greatest challenges we have is the challenge of unity, which is not uniformity, because individuals can't make civilizations. Do you understand that? If you want to make Islam easier to practice, you need communities that exemplify that practice. You need communities that exemplify that practice consistently enough that that practice becomes normalized. And human beings naturally incline towards that. And even if they don't, you as a practitioner of that will be normalized yourself. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. And then I'll say a few words about this postmodernism stuff, and then we can wrap up. And I think I may have told this story before, but it always comes back to me. I was in the airport when I was about Ubaydullah age, and running all over the place all the time, in Detroit. Detroit against everybody, right? And I was standing in the Burger King line at the airport in the morning. Wanted to get me one of those egg and cheese croissants. You know what I'm talking about? Right. There was a well-dressed black American gentleman standing in front of me with a crucifix. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, a cross. And I'm talking about one of them balls crosses. You know what I mean? You know, not the flat, you know, right? And he was standing in front of me. And the woman behind the counter came out and dumped a bunch of wrapped sandwiches in the bins, you know, and they slide down. This man stopped her. He said, "Excuse me, miss, what's in those sandwiches? Don't tell me no swine, because I ain't eating no swine." What's wrong with that picture? What's wrong with that picture? I'm sorry? So tell me what's wrong with that picture. And not was he only not eating pork? He said, what? Don't. I ain't eat no pork. I ain't eat no swine. What was going on there? I'll tell you my interpretation of what was going on. Everybody relax. I'm going to take a deep breath. The nation of Islam, and by the way, for those of you who may be wondering, I was never a member of the Nation of Islam. No, because I want you to know this is not some recounting of the good old days. I was never a member of the Nation of Islam. All right? But it goes to the point that I'm trying to make. We have to understand this. All right? And when we understand this, we'll stop sitting around waiting on the scholars to do everything, because they can't do everything. They can't do half of what needs to be done. Scholars don't make civilizations. You do. The Nation of Islam had changed the cultural orthodoxy of the entire black American community. Wow. You understand that? And I don't want to exaggerate. I don't when I say entire, but everywhere you went in the country, you saw that influence. Okay, put it that way. All right? And this man lived where? In Detroit, a very highly, densely populated urban area, all right, where the cultural influence of the nation translated into a new black cultural orthodoxy. You follow what I'm talking about now? To the point that even people who are not affiliated with Islam saw it as consistent with their now black identity not to eat pork. Now you imagine in that context, me, or you, Ubaydullah, and this happens. Now we're at the family reunion. They don't even know what I'm talking about. At the family reunion, as a Muslim, you are a tiny minority. You understand what I mean by that? Your sister talking about, you know what I'm talking about? Right? And yet, it is now to the point you can refuse to eat pork and ain't nobody tripping. You understand what I'm talking about? Now you can practice your deen normalized. That was not the result of a fatwa. That was the result, all right, of creating a cultural norm through numbers and repetition and confidence. Does everybody follow what I'm talking about? And so now, I have an easier time practicing my Islam. Did you understand what I mean by that? All right? I have an easier time professing what it is that I believe. All right? I don't have to hide it and be shy about it. All right? And the pressures out there, and make no mistake about it, they are tremendous on many people. All right? And this is why we have to add what Sheikh Taha talked about in terms of that third obsession with building civilization. Did any single member of the nation do that? I mean, make that change? How did that come about? That took numbers. That took numbers and repetition. And when we all divided, can't stand each other, scared of each other, don't trust each other, how can we do that? How can we do that? And I think that one of the things we have to pay very close attention to is, the country is changing, is it not? Towards what? We still have opportunities now that may not be there tomorrow. We need to capitalize on that. And so one of the things that I want to just encourage us to think about, because you see, once we recognize Amaran, civilization building, as a part of what it means to be a Muslim community, because make no mistake about it, all right, whether we like it or not, we are in a stage of civilizational competition. And there are winners and there are losers. And what we want to be is winners. And when we recognize that, we then can recognize everybody in here has a role. There are no spectators here. Everybody in here can make that contribution. How? By how we carry, sometimes I'll be at one of these, like, I hate to say it, like elite meetings. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Right? I mean, I don't even know why I'm there, but I get invited, And, like it's time for Asr. I mean, you're the only Muslim there. And you feel it. You start sweating a little bit. I got to pray Asr, man. Right? And then you excuse yourself a minute to go to the restroom, make wudu. And you're walking down the hall. This happens. You're walking down the hall. You see a janitor with a mop and a bucket. And he says, and by the way, I have no idea how people know this. I can be in Versace and they just know I'm a Muslim. I'm serious. And you're walking down the hall and this janitor with a bucket and a mop, he says, what? Assalamu alaikum. Whoa! You go back into that room, what? Look here, I got to make salah. No, you follow what I'm talking about. The power in numbers. Even prophets ask not to be left alone. We are social beings. We need that. And we have to stop being each other's worst enemy in that regard. We have to recognize our contribution to our situation. All right? In circumstances that we don't have to fear what many Muslims around the world have to fear. All right? Let me just very, very quickly say something simple about this whole postmodernism business that they asked me to talk about. What I want to say is a couple of things. One, postmodernism, as I mentioned, is a response to modernism. And modernity is itself, in large part, and we're talking about the intellectual dimensions of modernity. We're not talking about capitalism or the rise of the nation state. We're starting to get into details now, aren't we? I'm turning into professor. I'm going to move away from that. But modernity has many aspects. But the main aspect that affects us is the intellectual aspect of modernity. All right? And the emergence of reason, all right, as the new authority in place of the Christian institution, in place of the church. Right? The Enlightenment did not get rid of authority. It replaced one authority, the church, for another, reason. But this is a very specific kind of reason that I'll talk about more in detail tomorrow. And while the Enlightenment saw that reason as a way of liberating themselves from the authority of the church, that particular mode of reason turned out to be itself quite tyrannical. All right? Because it bound people to I'm trying to simplify this. You see, if I sit here in, where are we at now? Dulles?
Sterling.
D.C. And I come up with an understanding of justice that is based on my reasoning. All right? And then for some reason, because I have the civilizational authority to do this, all right, I normalize that understanding of justice for the entire world. I've never been to China, but I can tell them what justice is. On the basis of what? Reason. I've never been to Zimbabwe, but I can tell them what justice is. On the basis of what? Reason. All right? This disembodied, transcendent reason turned out to be in itself another form of being shackled. Postmodernism, which is also a Western phenomenon, comes in and revolts against Enlightenment reason. In the process, however, it destroys all understandings of ultimate anything. There is no such thing as truth, because reason that was supposed to produce that truth has been proved to be not transcendent, not neutral, not ideologically free, not culturally free. So they reject it all. Contrary to what many of us think, Islam is not the only entity, all right, that has issues with postmodernism. Postmodernism rejects Marxism vehemently. Why? Because Marxism, based on reason, comes up with this grand narrative where it can solve everything on the basis of a theory, based on reason. This is out. Postmodernism even attacks modern science. Why can't you have modern science? Because you cannot have facts. And why can you not have facts? Because the reason on the basis of which those facts are supposed to be based is not neutral. Does everybody understand what I mean by that? All right? Once we get there, then what about morality? Completely relative. All right? And so how do we sustain a moral vision in the world? All right? I'll end with this, and I will deal with it in more detail tomorrow. Is that, what I want to say is that what's tragic about this is that the whole world has come to understand reason in the way that the modern West characterized reason. Islam's understanding was not there. It was not a part of that global discourse. All right? And not only that, the whole world now is influenced by the Western revolt against that reason. Islam had its own discourse with that reason as well, that did not lead to postmodernism as we have it. And so what we have in our cumulative heritage as Muslims, all right, is a whole nother vision of the world. that we first, of reality, of human existence, and we first have to become familiar with that, and then acquire the courage and the confidence to take that out into the world. I'll stop here, inshallah, because I've talked more than enough, and inshallah we'll see you again tomorrow. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakumullah khairan, Dr. Jackson, for those beautiful words. That's just the intro, guys. So there's a lot more where that came from, inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow. For those that don't know, Dr. Jackson is the King Faisal Chair of Islamic Studies at the University of Southern California. But along with him, we are very, very honored also to have Ustadh Ubaydullah Evans, a good friend, if I may call him that, mashallah. Also the first African-American graduate of the Al-Azhar University.
If I can clip this to my sweater, how's this going to work? At Juma, I wore my coat, but it was just too hot. I think this time I'm just going to snag the sweater. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna al-hamda lillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nastahdi. Wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم اما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمه الله. It goes without saying that it's a great honor and a great privilege to be in your company this evening. I want to thank all of the volunteers at ALIM and all of the staff that labored often behind the scenes, indefatigably, to give us opportunities not only to speak from the stage and to present our ideas and this barrage of facts and dates and verses of scripture, etc., but also to be enriched by each other's company. You know, whenever I think about these programs, I think about how much I enjoy listening to our asatida, our dakatir, our doctors, our instructors, but also how much I enjoy the sorority and the fraternity of the Muslim community. And during COVID, we did not have these opportunities readily available to us. So to be back in space together, learning together, sitting together, eating together, I'm extremely grateful for that. And I'm particularly grateful to the people that work so we can have these opportunities. I'm also humbled to be here with Dr. Jackson, Dr. Zainab. We'll be hearing from Imam Magid during the program. People that I've always looked to as mentors, teachers, role models, quite frankly. And so I look at this list of presenters and I ask myself, what am I going to contribute to this conversation? And a few impressions come to mind. You know, when my wife, Hafidhahullah, may Allah preserve her, and if you see her, tell her I said that. After saying her name, when she was pregnant with our second child together, we went for a prenatal visit, and they determined through looking at the ultrasound that the child had an enlarged nuchal translucency, which is, they're looking at the images and they called it the nuchal fold. And so the doctor came in, and the doctor seemed a bit tense and panicked, and he said, the baby has an enlarged nuchal translucency. And I said, I don't know what that means. He said, well, for all practical intents and purposes, it means that the child might be at greater risk for Down syndrome. And I still remember the look that my wife and I gave each other. Like, he said, but if you want to, we can do a test called an amniocentesis. And through that test, we can determine with amazing specificity, with amazing accuracy, just how at risk the child is. And so I said, hold on. Before you do that, I have to do something very important. Give us a couple of days. What I had to do was go on Google. No, seriously. I went and I Googled to see, had anyone else dealt with this? And if they did, what did they do? And so I'm reading all of these messages on a message board. And some of those messages, I still remember them. And one in particular was life-changing for me. One person said, yeah, we did the amnio, and we learned that our baby had a 1 in 10,000 chance of having Down syndrome. And so the amnio was very comforting for us. It provided great consolation for us, as it were. And then one person said, I did the amnio and I learned that my baby had a 1 in 6 chance of having Down syndrome, but the baby was born healthy, and like stories like this. But then one woman said, we did the amnio, and the doctors determined that the chance of my child having Down syndrome was infinitesimally small. And she said, my husband and I, we were immediately relieved at this news. She said, then I delivered, and when they handed the baby to me, I looked at the baby, and just from the phenotype of the baby, I knew the baby had Down syndrome. And she said, I immediately said to myself, if there was a 1 in some 1,000 chance of my child having Down syndrome, and my child actually has Down syndrome, how blessed am I? I was that 1 in 20,000, 1 in 30,000. I have been chosen for this task. And it might be this task through which I gain God's grace and His forgiveness. I'm reading this on my phone and I'm like crying because it reminded me of something that Ibn Ata'illah said. He said, إِنَّمَا يُعِينُهُ عَلَى حَمْلِ الْأَقْدَارِ شُهُودُ حُسْنِ اختياري ذلك أن العبد إذا شهد اختيار الله تعالى له علم أنه لم يقصد ألمه لأنه به رحيم. He said, when the servant sees that what he or she is dealing with is something God chose specifically for them, they recognize that this has not been chosen to hurt me because God is with His servants, Rahim, merciful. Why am I mentioning this? Because as a community, a context of struggle, a context of difficulty has been chosen for us. This is the ikhtiyar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in just 20 short years, right, I've been Muslim for over 20 years. To steal Dr. Jackson's joke, I converted when I was 3. I've been Muslim for over 20 years. And subhanallah, the challenges that my daughter, my eldest is inshallah soon to be 17, inshallah, the challenges that she experiences trying to sustain her commitment to Islam are almost nothing like my own. Nothing. And this was only 20 years ago. You know, she's a junior in high school, and I look at her and I say, I was a junior in high school when I accepted Islam. And I look at her and I'm just like, wow. You know, one of my friends, he works as an imam, or he used to work as an imam in Boston. And he said that one day a young man came into his office And the young man asked him in earnest, Imam, why can't my girlfriend and I have a sexual relationship? We're consenting adults. The young man was a college student. He said, really, what's wrong with that? And my friend said, when he heard the question, he said, this is it. This is the moment that a student of Islamic studies lives for. A person just entered my office and asked me something that was directly asked to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I am going to repeat the answer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this young man is going to come away with the same thing the young man who asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came away with. And so he said he went through all of the requisite etiquettes. He said, young brother, come close to me. This is all from the hadith. He said, come close. He said, do you have a sister? The young guy said, yeah. Do you have aunts? He said, yeah. Do you have a mother? He said, yeah. He said, well, just like that, other people have sisters. They have aunts. They have mothers. Would you like for someone to do that to them? And he said the young man looked him squarely in his eyes and said, if that's what they want. If that's what they want. He said he was flabbergasted, speechless. You weren't supposed to say that. Right? You were supposed to say no. And then he was going to say, in the same way, other people. Right? No, right? He said, but he realized that in that moment, for that young man, what made a physical relationship moral was not that there was clear-cut responsibilities between those engaging it, that this was a relationship that came together under the provisions of the Sharia. This was a relationship that had the endorsement of family and community. The only thing that he needed for physical relationships to be moral was consent. He said, this is a different world. Now, my question, and what I think I'm going to be trying to address during my session in a very practical way, is how do we make the ideals of Islam relevant? How do we communicate them effectively in this world? And it is a task. It is difficult. In fact, I would even venture to say it's perilous. But one thing that I remember Dr. Jackson said to me, just in a casual phone conversation many years ago. We were talking, and you said to me, you said, what do you think about this hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يعلمنا صلاة الاستخارة كما يعلمنا سورة في القرآن. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to teach us istikhara the way he would teach us chapters from the Quran. I said, MashaAllah. Right? And then Dr. Jackson said, no. This actually suggests that even, MashaAllah, when you're that cute, you can just walk right in front and oblivious to the whole thing, you know. MashaAllah. He said, this suggests that even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not have all the answers. Even the guidance that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was upon, that Allah Ta'ala gave him, did not obviate the need of appealing directly to God, spontaneously, asking God, what should I do? And this is something that will be inevitable in our context. And that if we aren't doing that, if we don't find ourselves compelled to ask Allah, what should I be doing? What should I be telling my teenager? Right? What should I be talking about during my MSA sessions? What should I be speaking to my neighbors about? And I really don't know. But I'm appealing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Him to guide me. Then you aren't being honest about the nature of what we're dealing with. But the good thing for us is, if we are sincere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid us and reward us. And if we err, inshallah, with tawbah, Allah will forgive us. But what we want to talk about are some of those communal mechanisms, right? Some of those technologies of the self that we have to make accessible to people, so that some of what we have in our tradition becomes intelligible, becomes something that, its efficacy, its significance, its meaning can be seen by the people, the youth especially, of our community, and we also endeavor to share that with our neighbors. So أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Inshallah, we'll ask Dr. Zainab to say a few words about her session as well, which will be tomorrow morning. Dr. Zainab, as you all know, mashallah, is a professor of Islamic studies at Howard University, and just amazing. Yeah, okay. She's a community member also.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina wa habibina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dr. Jackson, Brother Ubaydullah, I'm honored and humbled to be with you in this program and on this table. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, about being our teacher in different ways. You're teaching us how to really bring Islam back as an ummah. And this is also part of, is just to add to what you said about the maqasid Qur'aniyah, what my father, rahimahullah, said about Tawheed, Tazkiyah, and Imran, which built that civilization. But he added the concept of ummah. And this concept of ummah and community, it cannot, of course, build without that taking this responsibility and for every person in the community. And this was what I think his last years of his life, he worked on the Quran. And as usuli, as someone who established different methodology to understand and approach the Quran, it was mainly the focus on how to build that personal relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With building that strong and compassionate relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow every one of us, according and based on our background, understanding, level of iman, and also connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will allow us to dive into the Quran, ask questions, strengthen our relationships, come always with that kind of whatever that you have, you will have that dialogue with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dialogue with the Quran. And of course, as methodologies, try to understand and try to apply and implement whatever that offered by our scholars as methods in practical way. For of course, and that's what, inshallah, I will try to cover tomorrow, really to help my students. And by the way, I'm also using the same methodology even with my non-Muslims, with the students who are Christians at the seminary or the divinity of Howard University. And I connect them with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well, because I believe this message is not only for Muslims, but is for humanity. And when we establish that understanding, we get the result. And that's what, in my classroom, I find that sometimes it's just like last week, this week, in fact, on Tuesday, one of the students, she was telling me about the salah and the prayer. What would you like what would you like to know about Islam or something? And suddenly I found her raise her hand. And she said this. And I looked at this, I said, what is this? She said, the dua. And the way how you make that dua, and when you raise your hands as if you open your hands and your hearts and asking God, the Creator, to come to you. And she started crying. And she said, it's not the same way as when you pray, as if it's a closed world. But for Muslims, when they open their hands and ask Allah, it's something different. This is one thing. And about the community, last semester also, I always speak about that community because I believe even with the African American community, is important to have Muslims and Christians to work together to build that kind of ummah. Now they know. They don't use even the community, the word community, but they use the ummah. Because they understood this is something, it's part of our relationships. And that's what we have to always improve. I'll give you one story, and then I will give you the prerequisite for my class tomorrow, inshallah, or my session tomorrow, before we get to approach the Quran, inshallah, to find our answers and our questions about Tawheed. Last semester, also part of the practices and exercises, I asked my students to interview one of the Muslims just to learn more about the concept of Tawheed, Ummah, family. And suddenly one of the students, he said, can I question or ask or interview my sister, baby sister? I said, baby sister? I thought, because he's a Christian. He said, my baby sister is Muslim for 20 years. And I haven't spoken with her for 20 years. In this class, because what you mentioned and what we learned since we started this class, now I feel my heart is open to call her and ask about her and interview her. Then he came next week. Wallahi, he was crying. And he said, I left my sister for 20 years because she became Muslim. And not only me, but the entire family. But for 20 minutes interview with her, I reconnected. And he emphasized this just also on Tuesday. He was telling me, my baby sister says to you, Salamu Alaikum. That's, I think, what we as Dr. Jackson emphasized, that we have to have that confidence in what we believe and how we approach it and how we address, and have that love, not only for Muslims, but for humanity. Because that's what it is, the message that we carry, and that's how the Quran teaches us. And as we come closer to Allah's words and the Quran, we will find ourselves there. So, the question for every one of us, do you know the Quran? The second question, does the Quran know you? And how does the Quran know you? What are the signs that you can find for yourself that the Quran knows you? And the prerequisite for the class tomorrow, so please work on this tonight and at Fajr, you need to work on your heart, because this Quran was revealed upon the heart of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And once we come to approach this book, we have to really come and ask ourselves seriously and honestly about the state of my heart. Where am I? What is the state of my heart? I will, inshallah, tomorrow also, because we don't have time today. I want you to look for 3 characteristics that the Quran describes the heart, the healthy heart. We have the diseased heart, but we have the healthy hearts. And the 3 categories are al-munib, al-qalb al-munib. And as you know, of course, the heart in the Quran is qalb, and also fu'ad, and also is mentioned sadr. But mostly we are talking about qalb, the heart. So there's munib, which is returning and turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time. And this is in Surah Qaf, Surah 50. For all of you, you can go back and recite it and read it. And the second one is al-mutma'in. And this is also, you will find it in Surah Ar-Ra'd, Surah 13, and the ayah 28. And you can read the entire surah and reflect. And I will take my students, inshallah, tomorrow also in that journey with Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the stage, the final stage is Qalb Salim, which is also with Ibrahim alayhi salam. So we have to always ask ourselves, how is your heart today? And inshallah, that will cover many issues, but also I want to end with something. Subhanallah, there is a Math Heart Institute, which is an American institute, has nothing to do with the Quran. And subhanallah, they found so many things about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I don't want to really just connect this with that, but what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using about the heart, ya'qilun, the word ya'qilun, which is the intellect. It becomes as part of the science that people maybe know, not even before that pay attention to. But Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who explained to us about that heart. When it's sound, the entire body is sound, and when it's corrupt or spoiled, it affects the entire body. And subhanallah, I have a slide for you, but it didn't work to show you that that's what it was. It has been now found that the coherent in the heart, when you reach this, the entire body, the entire faculties will be in coherence, which is, it starts with that qalb mutma'in, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakumullahu khairan, Dr. Zainab. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ennoble all of the people who are here. May ennoble our illustrious scholars who have shared their words today. Inshallah, we're going to go ahead and break for Isha. Just 2 quick announcements. Inshallah, what we're going to ask everyone to do is we're going to have to clear out this area here so we can get ready for Salah, so in as orderly a fashion as possible. Also, just announcements. We have a bake sale at the Kahwa Cafe, so please go support the local MSAs with the bake sale, inshallah ta'ala. And I want to ask everyone to make a special dua for the Qurtuba volunteers and the ALIM volunteers that have helped put this program together. Specifically, Brother Arif, mashallah, and Sister Amna have done an amazing job here from Qurtuba, Sister Shireen and the entire staff at ALIM. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them. Jazakumullahu khairan. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll see everyone tomorrow morning. Assalamu alaikum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
لا إله إلا الله سوى صدق خلل. Straighten the lines, fill in the gaps. الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض
ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الله نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها المصباح في زجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه يسبح له فيها بالغدو والآصال الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله. I was asked just to say a few words, inshallah. So for those that are conversing, if you can continue the conversation outside the musalla, that would be wonderful. We were just blessed to hear from some wonderful guests for our community, Dr. Sherman Jackson, Ustadh Ubaydullah Evans, and Dr. Zainab Alwani. Unfortunately, Imam Magid was not able to be here tonight. He's actually still traveling, and inshallah we ask that Allah returns him home safely. For those that don't know, this weekend we will have a special program here at the ALIM Center to discuss topics of, as Dr. Jackson mentioned, modernity and postmodernity, and understanding what our perspective as Muslims should be. Oftentimes, we forget that Islam has a rich intellectual tradition. Rich intellectual tradition. There are modern philosophers today that reference the works of Al-Ghazal, who we know as Al-Ghazali, of Ibn Rushd, or of Averroes, who we know as Ibn Rushd. Right? These were known as the pinnacle of civilizational and philosophical authority at their times. And for us, what Dr. Jackson was mentioning just before Isha, that Dr. Zainab and Ustadh Ubaydullah were building on, is that we can't do this alone. We can't do this alone. In order for us to create and build a civilization, it has to be all of us that are involved. And what I mean by that is that some people think that if you had 1 million more, 2 million more, 10 million more scholars, that your problems would be solved. Right? Some people say, oh yeah, if only we had 20 million more scholars, 10 million more scholars, then we could solve these problems. But the reality is, brothers and sisters, that your dealing and my dealing on an everyday basis is not with scholars. It's with the average Muslim. Getting more scholars would be nice, but raising the Islamic literacy of the general public, of us, the average Muslims, is what we need. So that when you and I come to the table to discuss issues, we're coming and we're singing from the same sheet of music. We're understanding things with the same foundational baseline. That is what the pursuit of knowledge should be for every single person here. You know, at ALIM Center we're offering these programs not just so we can pontificate in a vacuum somewhere. It's so that you and I are educated about how to deal with our issues, how to address the problems of modern society, how to build a better world for our children and our society's children. That's ultimately what we need. And the Prophet ﷺ, and one of his first khutbahs that he ever gave after the hijrah of to Medina, أفشِ السلام وَطْعَمُوا طَعَامٌ وَصِلُوا أَرْحَامٌ وَقُومُوا فِي اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ بِسَلَامٍ. He told the people, spread peace, feed food to one another, maintain your ties of kinship, but perhaps most importantly, brothers and sisters, pray at night when the people are sleeping, and you will enter paradise with peace. Our civilization, our ethos is in prayer. Without a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't matter how many accomplishments you have in the world. If this is missing, we lose everything. What do I mean by that? Our akhirah is gone. We have to build a better society infused with God-centeredness, infused with God consciousness, infused with God firstness, putting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. That is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us. This is why he was able to handle the most difficult situations that he was placed in, because he wasn't doing it for himself. He wasn't even doing it for other people. He was doing it solely for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the civilization we want to build. That's what we have built, and inshallah ta'ala, that's what all of you, and I included, are going to build here in America. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the best in this world and the next world, and protect us from the punishment of the fire. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq in all of our affairs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the knowledge to be able to correct the wrongs in society. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from all of the evils in the world around us, and allow us to be those who benefit society at large. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a proper understanding of His book and His teachings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala infuse within us a love for His beloved sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, and actions according to all that which pleases Him. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa barik wa sallimu tasliman kathiran kathira bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Jazakumullahu khairan. Inshallah ta'ala, for those that are interested, the ALIM program will begin tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. It'll be downstairs in the community hall. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.